Hi, today I want to talk about habits. So, our martial arts training, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Everything in our life affects our training, and our training affects all the other aspects of our life. There's this interconnectedness. So, with your martial arts training, you probably find that when you're training consistently, it has this ripple effect of, a positive impact on everything else. You sleep better, you want to take better care of yourself, so you eat better, you feel you can manage your stress level better, your relationships improve because you feel more confident, you can assert yourself, so your personal and family relationships and work relationships get better. So it has this positive effect on everything around you. And that relationship also goes in the other direction. So when you get a good night's sleep, you have more energy for training and you recover faster. When you eat well, same thing, better training and recovery. When your stress levels are lower, you feel more confident and focused when you perform, all those different things. And the opposite is also true, where you can have this negative effect. So let's say you compete at a tournament and you get injured. You like blow out your knee or something, and that's going to have a negative effect on the other parts of your life, right? Because there's those connections. So you're in pain, so you can't sleep well, you have to take time off work, so you're stressed about your financial situation, right? There's that interconnectedness all the time. So, and then the other direction, if you don't get a good night's sleep, your training suffers, right? If you don't eat well, you gas out in the ring, right? If your stress levels are high in your relationship, with your personal relationships, it affects your mindset and your ability to focus in the ring, right? So there's that interconnectedness all the time. So it's really important to talk about bad habits, quote unquote bad habits, the things that interfere with our life and our well-being. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to recommend a few resources here for you, and how I came to be thinking about this stuff is I've been binging this podcast. It's This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And I love this podcast. It's about alcohol and her struggles with alcohol. I myself don't have any issues with alcohol. I've never struggled with it, but the content resonates for me because I have struggled with other things. And I really don't think there's much difference between, like, say, struggling with alcohol and struggling with, body image stuff or compulsive eating or, dieting or those kinds of things. So it resonated for me. I've had disordered eating, and a lot of the stuff, it's like, yeah, that's what I was thinking and feeling and going through. So I've been listening to this, and she had in one of her earlier episodes a guest on named Amy Johnson. And Amy Johnson is a master life coach, and she has a YouTube channel too, which I'll give you the link to that. But she wrote this book. It is called The Little Book of Big Change. So Amy Johnson, and it's The No Willpower Approach to Breaking Any Habit. I highly recommend this book. I'll put a link below to this book. So I blasted through this book a couple of weeks ago. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here. Trying not to cough. So I'm going to talk about this book and things that she talks about and mind-blowing stuff that I read in this book. And I'm going to bring in some other stuff that I've learned elsewhere as well and read about too in other contexts. So here's the thing. None of us are immune to this, right? We all struggle with something. We all do. And, as martial artists, we want to perform our best and we want to feel in control over all of these things in our life. And that's the amazing thing with martial arts is we do get strong and we learn how to face adversity and all that stuff, but we have this struggle too with, like, it's not just our martial arts that, our whole life isn't martial arts. We have relationships, we have work, we have all these different things. And so when you have, bad habits or negative stuff going on in our heads, it affects us. It affects us on the mats. It affects all the parts of our life. And, ultimately, like, martial arts is about that internal struggle, right? And making peace with it and making peace with who we are and finding our strength anyway, despite adversity. So this is really important stuff. And I think, we train because we want to feel in control and to control our impulses and to do what we need to do without being tossed around by all that stuff all the time. So this is really important stuff for all of us. So habits, let's talk about habits. So habits in this context are thoughts as well as behaviors. They're both. So, and we're talking about bad habits, okay? So it's not just, good habits like brushing your teeth or whatever. We're talking about the stuff that takes over our life, the habits and the thoughts that feel kind of compulsive and obsessive, and we feel powerless to stop them. So you can have behaviors. So behaviors and thoughts, we'll talk about the behaviors. You can have, maybe it's drinking, maybe it's drug use, maybe it's gambling, maybe it's porn or sexual activity, maybe it's compulsive shopping, hoarding behaviors, eating stuff, dieting, binging, starving yourself, disordered eating. I've been through that. Social media, that's another thing I struggle with, is going down the rabbit hole on social media and feeling like I can't stop. So those are all different behaviors that we might engage in that are like bad habits, okay? And then there's thoughts, and thoughts could be, phobias. That's an obvious one, like being scared of spiders or being terrified that, you're like, as a parent, you want your kids to be safe, right? But being like obsessed with this fear that your kids are going to get hurt, right? And so, and you have this anxiety all the time. It could be thoughts about being judged by other people, so like a social anxiety or, excuse me, worrying about what other people think all the time. It could be thoughts that, we're not good enough. We're not good enough. We suck. It could be body image stuff, thinking like I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm too skinny, I don't look good. It could be, jealousy. Maybe you're obsessed with thinking that your spouse is cheating on you, and so you can have these thoughts, and then they can also lead to behaviors, right? Like, you think you're being cheated on, so then you go on this person's phone to snoop, right? So those thoughts can lead to behaviors, or they can just be the thoughts. They can just be those negative thoughts in our heads. And so now here's the important point, is that everything we do and say and everything we feel, all the actions we take and behaviors we engage in, they all start with thought. It all starts with what's going on in our head. So you have a thought that, oh, I'm hungry, and then you go to the kitchen to eat. You could also have a thought, oh, like I'm feeling really stressed. A cake will make me feel better, and then you go in the kitchen and have a whole cake, right? So it all starts with thought. It all starts with thought. Okay, and initially, these like bad habits and negative thoughts, they start off, they're actually a form of caretaking. And I know it doesn't seem that way, and it might surprise you, but we're actually trying to make ourselves feel better and to take care of ourselves. Okay, so we're trying to distract ourselves from stress or anxiety. We're trying to escape from something in our life. We want to feel good, right? So you binge eating, like you eat cake to make yourself feel better, right? Because cake is yummy, and it's like a distraction. You drink to deal with stress, to make yourself feel better than you did earlier in the day, right? So we do these things, misguided as they are. We do them. It's innocent when it starts off. So for me, I had disordered eating, and it started off one summer. I gained 10 pounds. I was 19, I think, when it started. I'd never cared about my body before that. Like, I didn't care if what I weighed. I didn't care how I looked. It didn't bother me at all. And then I gained weight because I was like stuffing down my feelings this summer about something, and gained 10 pounds. And then for the first time in my life, I thought, oh, I don't like my weight. And so I started, cutting back on what I was eating and going to the gym. And it started off innocently. It was like, okay, I gained this weight and I want to lose it. So I'm going to eat less and exercise. And it was really good. And I felt really good about myself. And then what happened was I lost the 10 pounds. And then because I was like, now had this body consciousness, this body awareness that I never had before. It's like, oh, I actually wasn't in the best shape before. I could probably lose more. I'll lose another 10 pounds. And I did. And then it kept going. Okay. And it got out of control. And I felt powerless to stop it. So it started off innocently. Well, innocent, I guess the very beginning of that was, oh, I'm not feeling good about myself, so or I'm feeling stressed, so I'm gonna eat stuff. I'm gonna eat more to feel better. Okay, so that was innocent. And then it was, oh, I've gained weight, so I'm gonna diet and exercise to lose that weight. Innocent, right? Um, and then it got out of control. Okay, so in the beginning, we're doing these things to feel better and to take care of ourselves. But eventually, they become habitual, they become habits. And what happens is we're actually creating physical changes in our brain. So, whenever you learn something new, like you learn a kata in karate, you create new pathways in your brain. When you learn how to ride a bike, when you learn how to walk, you create this circuitry in your brain. It's a physical thing that happens in your brain, okay? And so like at first, you learn a new kata at the dojo. You've never learned kata before, never done karate. It feels like your brain hurts, right? It feels like you're learning a new language. You have no idea what you're doing. And that's because like you don't have the circuitry in there, or you don't have anything that's similar enough that you've done before, and so you're creating new pathways in your brain for this new thing that you're doing. Okay, so we develop these pathways, and over time, when we do the same thing over and over, like we keep practicing a kata or we keep having a drink when we're stressed, that pathway physically becomes like thicker, stronger, and faster. That it becomes easier to navigate, faster to do that, and we start doing those things on autopilot. Okay, so you start off with like, let's say a good habit like brushing your teeth. At first it's like, oh, I've never brushed my teeth before, or let's say flossing, because not everyone flosses. So you start off, okay, I have to remind myself to floss, and at first it's difficult to remember, and then you start doing it and doing it, and every day you floss, and over time you create these pathways in your brain, and you start doing it on autopilot. You pick up the floss at bedtime and floss your teeth without even thinking about it, okay? Because you have that circuitry in your brain for this new behavior, okay? So think of it this way. You go for a walk in the woods. Let's say you're walking home from somewhere and you decide to cut through the woods. There's no path there. So you make a trail, right? You just start walking. And then every day you take the same route. And over time, that path will become a clear, obvious path. You're forging a path, you're making a path through the woods, right? And when you travel that path often enough, it becomes a really clear, obvious path, and it becomes easier to navigate. It's easier to walk on that path than anywhere else in the woods, right? And as you walk, like the grass wears away and the rocks kind of get tossed aside, and it becomes really quick. It's a really quick, fast process to go on that path, right? So the same thing happens when we're engaging in these thoughts and behaviors and these habits. Is they become a habit because there's a physical change in your brain. You're creating a path, and the more you travel that path, the easier it gets. And we do it on autopilot, okay? And over time, like if you stop traveling that path in the woods, it'll eventually grow over. But the thing is, it'll never completely disappear. That sounds a bit discouraging where you're wanting to kick a habit. You have this pathway in your brain for drinking, or a pathway in your brain for compulsive eating or whatever, or obsessive thinking. And the circuitry will always be there, even if you stop doing the thing. But it's actually okay because we can work through this, and there's a way to break those habits. So with all of this, like in a very real way, old habits do die hard because we've got the pathway there all the time, right? And you might find that you don't do something, and then years later you get this urge to do the thing again. It's because the pathway is still there, right? The path has grown over, but it's still there underneath, and it's really easy to rekindle that, which sounds discouraging, but wait, there's actually hope with all this. So what happens? We develop these bad habits. We develop these habits of thinking, behaving to make us feel better. And we're doing it to bring ourselves up to this like baseline of feeling good. Okay, we want to get up there. We're feeling low. We want to get back up there. Okay, what ends up happening is those habits that we engage in, they become the negative experience. They become the thing that is the source of our suffering. Okay, and they become the painful experience themselves. So then what happens is we have this urge to engage in a habit, like an urge to drink, an urge to overeat, an urge to check your partner's phone to see if they're cheating on you. And that urge becomes the pain that we want to avoid, right? And the urge, though, because like we're creating this physical change in our brain, it becomes stronger the more we listen to it. The more you honor that urge and do what it says, the stronger those pathways become. And so it becomes easy to just do it. And it becomes a really difficult thing to not do it. And it hurts to have this voice in your head saying, do this thing, have a drink, eat that cake, get on the scale and weigh yourself, even though you know it makes you feel horrible, do it. And it's really hard to fight it, right? So what do we do? So, but the thing is, the more we listen to that urge and follow it, the bigger that path becomes. It becomes a highway through the woods, okay? Becomes a highway. So our suffering then increases and we get stuck in this cycle and we feel powerless to stop it, okay? So, but the thing is, remember, those habits, in the beginning, they were innocent. Misguided as they were there to help us. So we want to be better, right? We want to get back to this baseline of feeling good. And, but the habits, they drop us down lower than when we started. But this is a good thing. Think about this. If you start off feeling, stressed out and you want to feel better, you engage in this habit of drinking or whatever to feel better again. But now the habit of drinking and the urges that creates are a source of your stress. That's dropping you down even lower than you were to start with. So now you're feeling worse than you were feeling. You feel worse now with that habit than you did when you started using that habit to feel better. So if you get rid of the habit, you're taking away all of that extra suffering, all of that extra pain that drops you down even lower. And so you'll automatically feel better once you can kick that habit, right? And we do know this. That's why we want to kick our habits. We do know that it is a source of suffering for us and we want to feel good again, right? Okay. So now something she talks about in this book, Amy Johnson, is she makes this analogy, and I'm going to talk about two different analogies here. So one is, hers is that who we are, we have this baseline of wellness and we are like the sky. So the sky is always there, right? But then there's weather, there's storms, there's clouds, there's hail and snow and, rain and sun and everything. The weather is not the sky. The sky is a constant. It's always there. It's always just the way it is. The weather masks the sky, though. It seems like, the sky is stormy. The sky is, no. The sky is just the sky. The weather changes, though. So who we are at our core, we are like the sky. We are this constant, totally whole, okay entity. And the stormy weather, all that weather, that's our thoughts, right? So we are not our thoughts, just like the sky isn't the weather. It's not the same thing. But those thoughts, they're so like tumultuous that it feels like that's who we are. It's like, that's my voice in my head. That's me. It's got to be me. No. Who you are is deeper than that. Who you are is actually a whole person. You are totally okay. So thoughts in your head that are creating that stress, right? Okay, so now another way to think about this, I've done a lot of reading of Jon Kabat-Zinn. If you've heard of this guy, he's awesome. I'm going to mention his book here. So he founded the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. It's used in hospitals. And he wrote this awesome book. It's called Full Catastrophe Living. Okay, I'll put a link to it below. And it's using the wisdom of your body and mind to face stress, pain, and illness. And this is a non-religious, not Buddhist, nothing like that. It's just mindfulness meditation, the art of paying attention, right? And the way he talks about it, it's similar to the sky weather thing, but what he says, it's like when we're able to, kind of connect with who we are and that wholeness that is in us, that peacefulness that is in us, separate from all of our bad habits and thoughts and stuff, it's like we're at the bottom of the ocean. We're sinking down to the bottom of the ocean where it's very peaceful and calm. And that is who we are at our core, is right down there, sitting at the bottom of the ocean in the sand. You might feel a little bit tossed around by the water, if it's a really, there's a lot going on, fish swimming by and stuff, but you're solid, right? You're solid and centered. Your thoughts, they are what's going on the surface of the ocean, all the waves crashing, all that stuff going on up there. That's your thoughts. And a lot of the time, we spend a lot of time in our heads, caught up in our thoughts. And it's like we're on top of the, on the surface of the ocean, tossed around by the waves. But if we can sink down, so to speak, below our thoughts, below those waves, sink down to the bottom of the ocean, it is very still and peaceful and calm down there. Okay? So I really like these two ways of looking at it. So our thoughts are not us. We are something more grounded than that. Okay? So when we have these negative thoughts come up, and these urges to drink, smoke weed, buy $1,000 worth of crap online or whatever it is, go on social media, it's a sign that we're off kilter. It's a sign that our thoughts are unsettled, right? That we're experiencing stormy weather, that we're being tossed around by the waves. It's a sign that something's going on for us. Okay? So I actually see this as a gift. So I talked about my disordered eating in the past, and I worked through that. It took me a lot of work and a lot of years of working through it, and not, judging what I was eating, not judging my body, that kind of thing. But it still comes up. And it still comes up because I have those pathways in my brain, right? It was habitual behaviors and thinking I was fat, thinking I was ugly, thinking I wasn't skinny enough. And then I would, engage in all these diets and, over exercising and charting my progress, like writing everything down and researching and learning everything about nutrition. And it was very obsessive. And it was, it was initially a way to feel better, right? To feel in control of my life, to take charge of my life and feel better about my body because I was making progress. I was working on it, right? But it became a source of pain for me. And now I have those habits still. I have it's in my head, right? The circuitry, but I don't engage in those behaviors very often. I try not to, but sometimes it does come up again. And like very recently, it's actually come up again for me. And what happens for me is I get caught up in it again, and I start pulling out the scale, weighing myself again, judging my looks, judging, that kind of thing, getting fussy about my eating. And with having a background in nutrition like I do, I really have to be careful with judging my intake. And I can't track food to specifically. I have to be really careful with that. Like counting calories doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work. Like I get obsessive again. I don't want to do that. So I do have a comfortable relationship with food now, but it does come up. And so I've been having this stuff come up again and thinking, what's going on? And getting caught up in it again, because it's an easy path to follow, right? The path is still there. But then I recently, a couple of days ago, pulled back and went, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is just the old stuff coming up. And remembering that, no, this is a gift. It doesn't feel great, right? But it's a gift because it's a sign to me that I am unsettled, that there's something going on, that I'm trying to escape. I'm trying to feel more in control. I'm not feeling good about myself, whatever it is. It's a sign to me that I need to pay attention. So I see that as a positive thing. Because if I didn't have that sign, I wouldn't know that anything was bugging me, that anything was wrong, right? Okay, so it's time to pay attention. That's what our bodies and our minds are telling us, right? And it does take practice to not engage with these negative thoughts and these bad habits. And so for me, like I have my phone. I avoided getting a cell phone until I was 40 years old because I knew I would get obsessed with it. I knew, and I also know for myself, if I spend too much time looking at a screen, I get some dissociation, right? So I have to be careful with that and mindful of that. So, but now here I am. I have my phone. I have my online venture. I'm always on my computer, right? I'm filming, I'm editing, I'm writing, I'm interacting on all my socials. And I have to be very careful not to go down the rabbit hole online. But I do. And I do it when I'm stressed. I do it when I'm bored. I do it when I need, I don't know, like that dopamine hit, like someone liked my post, woohoo, right? And it starts to feel obsessive and out of control. So I do things where I try and control it. And I have, willpower and discipline. And like, okay, I'm going to put my phone on focus mode, or I'm going to delete apps on my phone. But it always comes back because I have to go on my phone. I have to go on my computer, right? I have to go on all of my Karate Shrimp socials. I have to. So me trying to, white knuckle my way through it and like, I'm going to kick this habit or I'm going to like give into it or fight it or whatever, it's not working, right? So, you know, when we engage with in these thoughts and these behaviors, it makes it worse. It's like a toddler having a tantrum. Whether you are a parent or you have seen toddlers have tantrums in the story, you know what I'm talking about. A toddler has a tantrum. You take them to the store, they're tired, they're hungry, whatever. Usually, okay, my view on it, total aside, your kid was not ready to go to the store. You should not have taken them to the store. It's already too late. They have the tantrum because they're tired, hungry, and you were not paying attention, but never mind that. Anyway, so the kid wants some candy. You say no, they have a tantrum. It's embarrassing. All hell breaks loose, right? So, though, if you feed the tantrum, it won't stop. If you engage with your toddler, if you give them what they want, or if you fight them on it, it makes it worse. Okay, they just get louder. And like I have two kids and they were both, very intense toddlers and kids, and they had a lot of tantrums. And I'm sure I've had a lot of tantrums too in my life. Stubborn people have crazy, cool, huge tantrums that you cannot stop if you interact with them. So it's the same thing with our thoughts and our bad habits. If we engage with them in any way, they just get stronger. That urge gets stronger, right? So if you like common sort of thinking on this is, well, you need willpower. You need discipline to get over these bad habits. You just need to push through and toughen up, pull up your bootstraps, whatever, and, push through it. And it takes willpower and you're just weak. And it's like, no, that's actually bullshit. Because when you engage with it, it's like, and that's not to say that that doesn't work for some people. Some people can use willpower, discipline, and they can break a habit, and they can do that. But most of us can't. And the reason is that trying to fight the habit or trying to block the habit, and ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist and la 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 la, no, it gives it more power. It makes that voice louder in our head, right? Just as giving in to the urge to do the thing makes it more powerful too, right? So what happens is when we engage with these thoughts, like you have an urge to drink, let's say, and you you give into it, the urge gets stronger over time. If you fight it and say, no, I'm not going to drink, and you struggle with it, it just gets stronger. If you try and block it out of your head and pretend it's not there and just like willfully ignore it, it gets stronger. Okay, so because what it's doing, you're telling your brain that thought, that urge to have a drink or do whatever is really, really important. Look how much importance it has if you're struggling with it. Look how much space you're giving it in your head. So it must be worth listening to. It's so important. Like if you tell yourself, oh, I'm not good enough at karate. And then you start like struggling with that thought and arguing with that thought and saying, no, I actually am. Here's evidence of that. Or you say, no, I do suck and this is why. And you agree, or you try and block it out and la, 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 la. You're telling your brain that thought in your head that you're not good enough is really important. You're giving it a lot of attention, just like you're giving that toddler attention at the store. Okay, so it doesn't shut up. So the way she talks about it in the book is she talks about the two parts of our brain that are involved in this, or minimum two. Anyway, so there's your downstairs brain, your lower brain, your reptilian brain, and that's involved in like survival type stuff, fight or flight, keeping you alive, basically. And then you have your higher order processing, your upper brain, your upstairs brain, your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, and that's involved in like reasoning and motor control and all that higher order stuff. And so what happens is your lower part of your brain, it's in charge of your survival. And when you create habits and you start doing things on autopilot without thinking, that part of your brain takes over that thing. So it'll say, okay, well, if you have a habit, say you have a habit to drink when you're stressed. That part of your brain is like, well, this is a habit that you have, so it must be important. So, okay, we'll just take over and we'll tell you when you need to have a drink, right? Well, and so you get this voice in your head that feels very insistent and frustrating and hard to ignore. And it's the lower part of your brain that's trying to keep you alive, and it treats your habits like it's a do or die situation. So that's why that voice in your head feels like do or die. Listen to the urge, or like the world is ending, right? It's so insistent because of where it's coming from in our brain. But the thing is, that part of our brain isn't actually in charge. It's our upstairs brain is in charge of taking action. So that voice is so insistent that, you know, the upstairs brain is like, okay, this must be important. I better do this thing, right? I better engage in this bad habit. And the way she talks about it in the book, it's like the lower part of your brain telling you, have a drink, get on the scale, check your partner's phone. It's the backseat driver, okay? And it's really loud and obnoxious in the back seat. And us in the front, we're actually in charge of the car. The upper brain is actually in charge. We're driving, but that voice in the back is so loud and obnoxious and annoying that we feel like, okay, yeah, it's in charge. We better listen, okay? But it's not in charge. We're driving the car, okay? So we don't have to act on those messages. They're very insistent and strong because of the part of our brain that's yelling it at us, and because we've created this habit of listening to it. And so that pathway is really strong. That highway is, you know, going through the woods. It's easy. It's easy to listen to those urges. We feel like we have two parts of us struggling, right? The part of us that wants us to do the thing, and then the part of us that knows better. And it's because we do have two parts of our brain that are like engaging on this thing, okay? So that's why you feel like that, like you're torn. You're like, I know better, but I really want to do this thing. It's because you're having this communication between two parts of your brain, okay? So now, part of the relaxation and stress relief that comes from engaging these habits is the relief of that urge going away. So you have this voice in your head to do this thing, to engage in this habit, and it does not shut up. The toddler will not shut up. It's the toddler screaming in the store. When they finally quiet down, you're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, right? That relief. So when you have a drink, when you get on the scale, when you give the toddler candy, it gets quiet, and then we feel relieved. So that relaxation we feel when we engage in a bad habit is from the relief of the suffering brought by the urge. Does that make sense? So it's not real relaxation. It's a temporary thing that's like, okay, the voice shut up for a minute. Now I get a bit of rest until the next time that voice starts yelling at me again. So you never really relax because you know it's going to come back, right? You know that urge is going to come back. So this is worth working on, right? Because, you know, we can experience true relaxation and contentment and peacefulness and feeling whole and good about ourselves. But it does take some working on it. But the thing is, we don't actually have to do anything. And this is the beautiful thing with this method that she talks about in this book, is we don't have to do anything. We don't need willpower. We don't need discipline. We don't need to fight those thoughts and urges. We don't need to like try and ignore them and I can't hear you, and distract yourself with other things. You don't need to replace a bad habit with another one. If we can stop engaging with those thoughts that tell us we need to do this thing, that urge actually gets quieter. It fades over time. So the toddler will calm down. The toddler will calm down, okay? The little toddler in our head screaming at us will calm down if we stop giving in and if we stop fighting it. Okay? If we stop struggling, that voice will calm down. It does take time, and it does take practice. And I'm working on this right now. Again, like the eating thing, I became aware of it. So I was like, okay, I'm just not going to get on the scale because I don't need to. And that's just the same old habit. So I was like, okay, what you can do, and here's what you do. The thought comes up to do the thing, to step on the scale because you feel shitty, to have a drink because you're stressed, to whatever. The thought comes up, and instead of acting on it or fighting it or trying to block it out of your head, distract yourself, replace it with something else, you just sit back and look at it. So this is mindfulness. We're practicing mindfulness. You look at it and realize it's a thought. It's a thought in your head. and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to struggle with it. You don't have to do anything. It's just a thought. We get a lot of thoughts that go through our head that are pretty weird that we don't even pay attention to because it's just some random thing, right? Like, oh, there's a squirrel and blah, blah, whatever thoughts in your head, and you don't pay attention to it because it's just a thought going through your head, or you get some weird impulse that you've never had before just to, I wonder if I just like practice karate on my counter right now. How would that, and then the thought goes away. I can't think of any good examples, but you get my point. We get thoughts that go through our head that go away because we don't engage with them. But when we stop that thought and grab it and hold on to it and struggle with it, it keeps coming back. So we need to practice not engaging. We need to practice just letting that thought be, not trying to control it, not trying to fight it, just letting it be without judgment, without judging ourselves, without saying I'm a horrible person because I had this thought and this urge and I had this habit that I want to get rid of. Because you were doing it to help yourself, right? We do those things to help ourselves, and it's just not the right thing. We just didn't know any better. But now we do, right? So we can pause. We can pause in those moments and just try and pay attention to what's going on in our head and see that, okay, it's a gift. It's a sign that I'm unsettled. There's stuff going on and I need to pay attention, but I don't have to do anything with that thought. I don't have to do anything with it. And with practice, those thoughts will fade. Those urges will fade if we don't engage with them. They will fade over time. You might eventually find that that urge or that thought comes up out of the blue, like I did recently, just came up out of the blue, because the circuitry is still there. And like some people, they might find like they stop drinking and then, months or years later, they have a drink again, like because they're stressed, like, oh, I feel like having a drink. And then they feel like they fucked up. They feel like, oh, I fell off the wagon. Look at me. I'm useless. I'm a weak person. And really, it was just that the circuitry was still in their brain and they were feeling stressed. And so an old habit came up and they had a drink, and so what? Doesn't mean they're broken and doesn't mean they fucked up. It just means that they had a habit that was hard to break, and it's still there in their head. And so they followed an old pattern, but it was just to make themselves feel better. It wasn't evil, it was misguided, but they weren't doing it for bad reasons, right? And so let go of that judgment and say, okay, so I did that, but then you stop and pay attention and say, look, I fell off the wagon. Okay, I followed this habit again, followed this urge, but this is actually useful information that, look, no, I am stressed again. I do want to feel better again. I do want to get back to that baseline of wellness, right? And I just didn't know any better before, but now I do. And I don't have to keep drinking or overeating or dieting. I don't have to keep doing those things because I know better now. I know that there's another way. I can start paying attention and practicing self-awareness and just sitting with those urges when they come. When we can bring awareness to it, sometimes it just hits us because we're not being aware, right? And then when we do bring awareness to it, it's like, oh, that's why I had that urge. That's why. Oh, here it is again. It's just another urge. It's just a thought in my head. It's not a big deal. Okay? And over time, they weaken, right? They will weaken again. They will fade again. So this is how we can kind of get control back in our life, right? We've been in control this whole time. We didn't think we were, but we have been. But we were trying our best. We were doing the best that we could, and we were trying to feel good. We just didn't know that there's a better way. Okay? So you are an awesome person. You have this baseline of you at the bottom of the ocean feeling, I'm not saying you should be at the bottom of the ocean. That sounds kind of sinister, but you're peaceful, you're calm, you're well at your core. And you can discover that again. You can make peace with all of this and find that part of you again, right? And I really believe this, and I think this can have such a positive impact. Learning about this stuff and practicing new ways of engaging with our thoughts so that we can feel in control again, right? And feel well. And so practicing this can help you. It can help you perform better in your life and perform better in martial arts. And so I highly recommend this book, again, this Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn, as well as the little book of Big Change by Amy Johnson. The Jon Kabat-Zinn, he has a mindfulness program in here, and it walks you through, different types of meditation you can do, sitting, lying down, and how to handle those thoughts when they come up. So I highly recommend that resource. So thank you for listening.